Hi, I'm Kaylin. I spent 7 years quietly paying off my parents' house, thinking it would be a gift for all of us someday. But on my sister's wedding day, they handed it with a ribbon and applause to her husband. Then, like nothing happened, they tried to move into my vacation home. When I said no, they called the cops on me. That was the moment I realized sometimes the people who raised you don't think you exist unless you're useful. Before we dive in, tell me what time are you listening and where from? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Because what you're about to hear is what happens when quiet daughters stop being quiet. The gravel crunched under our shoes as Merrick and I stepped out of the car and onto the warm soil of the vineyard. Late September in Asheville always carried this quiet in the air, like nature was bracing for something to end or begin. I wasn't sure which applied to today. Merrick adjusted his blazer and reached into the inside pocket. I watched as he tapped the envelope twice habitually, $10,000. That was what we decided to give Callista and Griffin as a wedding gift. That, plus nearly 1/3 of the total cost of this whole setup. My younger sister's dream wedding in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains wasn't cheap, but Merrick's investment firm had hit a record quarter. I'd just landed a long-term consulting client. We could afford it, and after all, Callista was my only sibling. We walked toward the main archway. Ivy curled around the stone columns like it had lived there for centuries. Fairy lights flickered from the vineyard rows. Everything looked perfect, too perfect. My parents stood by the welcome table, beaming like royalty. My mother Vera fussed with Dad's bow tie, while he muttered something under his breath and half smiled. I watched them taking it in. They looked younger, lighter, glowing almost. I couldn't remember them looking this joyful at my wedding. They'd smiled back, then sure wished Merrick and me a happy life, but they hadn't glowed. Not like this. "Don't start," I muttered to myself. Merrick gave my hand a little squeeze. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said, though I didn't look him in the eye. A woman with a clipboard directed us to the seating chart. My finger traced the printed names down the glass panel until I found it. Kaylin Rosund. Kaylin with an I. I blinked. Close enough, I told myself. But when we reached the table, it wasn't close at all. Table 9, at the far back by the bar. No family in sight, just co-workers from Griffin's tech startup and some friends I didn't recognize. I hesitated. Merrick whispered, "Want me to switch cards?" I shook my head and forced a smile. "No, it's fine. It's her day." As we sat, I glanced toward the head table. My parents were already seated there front and center between Callista and Griffin. My chair scraped a little as I pulled it out, and not a single head turned, not even Mom's. Dinner began, and the room buzzed with toasts and laughter. Courses came and went. Wine was poured generously. I declined. Something in my gut twisted every time someone clinked a glass and shouted, "To the happy couple!" Then the microphone feedback cut the chatter. My mom stood up, straightened her dress, and tapped the glass. "If we could have everyone's attention." People quieted instantly. Dad rose beside her. "We just wanted to say thank you to everyone for celebrating our beloved daughter's new chapter." A hush settled. I felt my heart jump. Were they talking about me? I glanced around, then back at them. "Watching Callista grow into the woman she is today," Dad continued, "has been one of the greatest joys of our lives." A slow throb built in my temples. "She's brought so much light laughter and love to our family," Mom added, voice trembling with emotion. Someone at another table whispered, "And so?" She continued, reaching into her clutch. "We wanted to give her and Griffin something to start this journey with, something meaningful." I saw the envelope before I even registered what it was. "We're gifting them the house," Mom said proudly. "Our family home. It's theirs now." Gasps and applause. I heard claps, cheers, even a few teary sniffles, and I sat frozen. The house? The one I had been paying the mortgage on for 7 years, quietly after Dad's hours were cut, and Mom's arthritis worsened. The house that still had my name tied to the escrow account, the insurance, the repairs, no warning, no conversation, no thank you, just gifted away like I didn't exist. Callista burst into tears, throwing her arms around our parents. Griffin grinned like he'd won the lottery. Maybe he had. I forced my lips into something that resembled a smile. My nails dug into my napkin under the table. Merrick didn't say anything, just placed his hand on my knee. "I'm okay," I said softly. "Don't." But I wasn't. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. I didn't touch my food, I just watched them. Callista glowing, Mom dabbing her eyes like she was proud of herself. Dad laughing like he hadn't missed my college graduation because of a golf trip. By the time dessert came, I'd had enough. "I need air," I told Merrick, pushing back from the table. He stood, but I waved him off. "Just 5 minutes." I walked down the gravel path away from the main tent, past the rows of hanging lanterns, past the photo booth, toward the overlook, where the photographers were staging more pictures. I stopped behind a hedge, just before they could see me. There they were, Callista and Griffin, posed on the porch of the house, my house. The photographer arranged them like a Hallmark ad. "Okay, now hold up the key together." They both turned to face the camera. Griffin fished something out of his pocket. My breath caught. They lifted the brass house key like it was a damn trophy, like it was a symbol of legacy, like I had never existed. I didn't say a word during the drive home. Merrick kept glancing at me, like he was waiting for the dam to break, for the screaming, the tears, the explosion, that if I were another woman might have come right then and there. But all I could do was sit stiffly, arms folded, watching the tree-lined road blur past the window. When we pulled into our apartment's garage, I got out without a sound, walked inside, and placed my shoes neatly by the door. The hum of the fridge was the only noise in the apartment. I headed to the bedroom, peeled off the dress, hung it carefully, then sat down on the edge of the bed. Merrick hovered in the doorway. "You want to talk about it?" I shook my head. "I'm fine." He stayed quiet for a beat. "Kaylin, that was... I should have seen it coming." I said, cutting him off, because somewhere deep down, I had maybe not the key, not the speech, but I'd felt it building for years. The little slights, the way I disappeared in a room full of my own family. I just hadn't expected the slap to come with applause. The next week passed in a strange kind of haze. I went through the motions, client calls, spreadsheets, case reviews, but my mind wasn't really there. Every time someone mentioned weddings or family, it was like someone dragging a fork across a plate in my head. Then, on Wednesday, it arrived. A pale pink envelope tucked between bills and a grocery coupon flyer. Merrick brought it in and tossed it on the counter. "Looks like a thank you note." I stared at the cursive writing Merrick Davison guessed. I opened it. Inside was a card with gold foil lettering. "Thank you for being part of our dream day," and a short message scrawled in Callista's signature bubbly handwriting. "Thank you so much for your generous gift and for helping make our wedding so magical. We'll always remember your kindness. Love, Callista and Griffin." No mention of me, not even once. I read it twice. My eyes scanned every line, searching for the possibility that maybe I'd missed something. That surely she hadn't just thanked Merrick. That I, who had planned, paid, and stayed silent, wasn't just guessed, but I was. I dropped the card in the trash without another word. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water, staring blankly at the fridge magnets. Merrick came over, leaned on the counter, arms folded. "You okay?" I gave him a look. He sighed. "Kaylin, I know you don't want to hear it, but maybe it's time to stop making excuses for them." I stayed quiet. "You've done more for them than most people would. You paid their mortgage. You show up for every birthday, every holiday, even when they forget yours, and they act like you're what some neighbor who drops by out of politeness." I opened my mouth to defend them. "They mean well," I started. He raised an eyebrow. "Do they?" I closed my mouth. The words felt hollow before I even said them. "Why do I always rush to defend people who forget me so easily?" I murmured. Merrick didn't answer. He just reached over and squeezed my shoulder. Later, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, spinning in slow, deliberate circles. My mind wandered. No, it unraveled. Threads pulling back through years I hadn't dared look at closely before. My law school graduation. I'd worked 3 jobs to put myself through. And when I walked across that stage, my parents handed me a check $50 and a card that said, "So proud. Love, Mom and Dad. 2 years later, Callista graduated with a communications degree from a state college. They gifted her a brand new Subaru with a giant bow and a party at the lake house. I told myself money was tight back then, that maybe they'd finally gotten a bonus or some tax refund the year she graduated. I'd wanted to believe that. But what if it wasn't that? What if I was just less wanted? What if I was always the contingency plan, never the favorite? I rolled onto my side and shut my eyes. Sleep didn't come. Friday morning, I walked into the office early, hoping burying myself in client files would keep the spiral at bay. It didn't. By mid-morning, I was sitting across from a small business owner going over a standard tax review. He was trying to sort out a partnership dissolution and asked casually, "Hey, if I paid half the mortgage for the last 5 years but the deed's in her name, do I get anything back if we split?" I blinked, my throat tightened. He waited, pen in hand. "And if it's not in your name," I said slowly, "legally, it gets complicated." I heard my own words like they were meant for me. 7 years. 7 years of writing checks, transferring funds, taking on the upkeep when Mom couldn't handle it, and Dad was between gigs. Never once had I asked to be added to the title. I just assumed they knew that they'd remember that they were decent. But decent people don't erase your name from a card. Don't call your partner and guest. Don't take what you've paid for and hand it off like a door prize. Back at my desk, I opened the real estate records database. It took 5 minutes to confirm what I already knew. The house had always been in their names, Ronald and Vera Rosund. No cosigner, no amendment. And last week, the deed had been officially transferred to Griffin and Callista Holloway. Recorded, notarized, final. I sat there for a long time, not moving, not thinking. Eventually, I opened my drawer, pulled out a Post-it, and scribbled something on it. I wasn't part of the gift because I was the one who paid for it. That night when the phone rang and I saw my mother's name, I already knew it wasn't going to be an apology. The phone rang twice before I picked up. "Hi, sweetheart," Mom chirped, as if she hadn't just watched me disappear from her daughter's wedding in stunned silence. "It's been too long. Callista and Griffin just got back from Bora Bora. We're having dinner this Saturday, just the 6 of us. You and Merrick should come." Her voice was all frosting. No cake. I waited a beat. "Yeah, dinner," I said flatly. "Yes. We'll make that rosemary pot roast you love. Come around 5. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe some broken part of me still wanted an explanation. Hoped they'd admit they'd gone too far. That this dinner would be a peace offering, a conversation, a chance to acknowledge what they did. But deep down, I knew better. Saturday came with a gray chill that didn't quite match the calendar. Asheville was shifting into fall. The leaves hadn't fully turned, but the breeze carried the first hints of change. Merrick and I drove in silence until we hit the turnoff. I stared at the familiar mailbox. The house looked the same and completely different. There were new curtains in the front window, white lace where Mom's sunflower valances used to hang. The doormat read, "The Hallways Est, 2023. Callista's pink running shoes were parked by the door, lined up neatly beside Griffin's oversized sneakers. I stood on the porch and stared at the brass knocker I'd helped Mom polish every Thanksgiving growing up. "It's like I never lived here at all," I whispered. Inside, the smell hit me first. It wasn't just the pot roast, it was the candle. Vanilla cashmere, Callista's favorite. Mom used to burn cinnamon apple. The living room had been rearranged, my father's old recliner gone. A sleek, cream-colored sectional now curved under the window. Dinner was already served when we stepped in. My mom kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong. "You look tired, honey, working too much." Callista beamed from her seat, radiant in a white sweater that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Griffin gave me a nod like we were old buddies. Merrick and I took the only 2 remaining seats, one of which used to be my father's. I pushed a carrot around my plate, waiting. It didn't take long. "Well," Mom said, setting down her fork delicately, "now that Lily and Griffin have their own space, your father and I have been thinking." My gut tightened. Dad jumped in. "We'd like to move into your cottage." My brain stalled. "What?" "You know," he continued casually, The little house you bought up in Fairview. It's perfect for us. Quiet single story close to our church. You want to move into my home? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Well, it's not like you use it full time, Mom said, smiling too brightly. And it's just sitting there most weeks, Callista added. You and Merrick could live together, couldn't you? Merrick's jaw clenched. I stared at them. My mother's hopeful expression, my father's expectant nod, my sister's smug little half-smile. It hit me. They hadn't invited me to dinner for closure or reconciliation. This wasn't about family. This was about acquiring the next thing I built. I set my fork down. So let me get this straight, I said slowly, calmly. You gave away the house I paid the mortgage on for 7 years, and now you expect to move into the one I actually own. Kaylin, don't be so harsh, Mom said. We're not taking it, just living there. You didn't even ask. You decided like always. You're being dramatic, Dad muttered. No, I said, my voice sharper. I'm finally being honest. Callista slammed her fork down. You've always been jealous. You never liked when I got more attention, more help. You act like you're so noble, but you've been bitter since college. That's why they love me more. I never made them feel guilty for it. My breath caught. And just like that, there it was, out in the open. What I'd never dared say, she screamed across a table set with our mother's best china. They love you more, I repeated softly. Nobody denied it. Not even them. Merrick reached under the table, took my hand. I stood up. If they love you so much, maybe they can live with you. I pushed back my chair. Merrick followed. Nobody moved to stop us. As I shut the door behind me, I didn't feel guilty. I felt awake. I didn't say much on the ride home that night. Merrick didn't push. The car was silent except for the low hum of the heater kicking in. It had dipped into the 40s, the kind of chill that settled into your bones more than your skin. At home, I dropped my purse on the side table and slipped off my shoes. My hands moved on autopilot, tidying the pillows, opening the fridge just to stare. But inside, everything had shifted. The guilt that usually crept in after a family confrontation wasn't there. Not this time, just a strange clarity, like something had finally snapped back into place. For the next few days, I buried myself in work. I let the office eat me whole. Client calls, tax prep files, budget forecasting for a small bakery downtown. It was easier to focus on someone else's numbers than my own thoughts. That Friday, I took the day off. I wanted a break before quarterlies started rolling in. I made breakfast, washed the windows, let the quiet stretch long. Then my phone buzzed. Motion detected at your property. My eyes locked onto the notification. Brevard, the vacation home. Seconds later, another buzz. This time a call. Unknown number, but I knew what it was. This is Dana from Carolina Watchdog Security. Are you the homeowner of 417 Orchard Trail? I am. We had a motion alert. 2 individuals entered using a key. Their names match a Ronald and Vera Rosend. Can you confirm authorization? I stared at the floor. They used a key. Yes, ma'am. That key was not given for that purpose. Do you want us to alert local law enforcement? Yes, I said calmly. I want them removed. By the time I hung up, Merrick was standing in the doorway. What happened? They're in the house. The Brevard house. He blinked. Kaylin, they used a key like they belonged there. 10 minutes later, we were on the highway. Leaves blurred outside the window, gold and rust-colored against the early October sky. My thoughts spiraled. Past birthdays, skipped promises broken. The way Callista had thrown her words like knives just a week earlier. You don't know how to share. This wasn't about sharing. It never had been. They didn't think they were taking. They thought it was theirs to begin with. We pulled up just past noon. The gravel crunched under the tires as we approached the porch. And there they were, my parents, sitting like squatters beside a stack of plastic bins, a cardboard box labeled "Linen's a Bag" from Home Goods. My mom was sipping from a travel mug. My dad stood when he saw us, as if this was some kind of reunion. There you are, he said. We figured you'd come around. I got out slowly, walked right past him. The sheriff's car was already parked nearby. The deputy stood waiting, arms folded. "They don't have permission to be here," I told him. My mother's mug clinked sharply against the wood as she stood. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "After everything we've done for you, how can you be so ungrateful?" "Ungrateful," I repeated, almost laughing. "You handed away my childhood home like a door prize. Now you think you're entitled to my vacation property." My father stepped forward. "It's just temporary." "We assumed that's your problem," I said coldly. "You never ask. You assume, you take." "Kaylin," my mom's voice broke into something shriller. "We are your parents. We raised you. We supported you." "What exactly did you support?" I cut in. "Because I remember my 21st birthday dinner being skipped for Callista's volleyball game. I remember paying off your house when you were behind on taxes. And I remember getting a $50 check for law school graduation while you bought her a car." Her face twitched. "That was a different time." "No, it was always the same time. I just kept pretending it wasn't." The deputy cleared his throat. "Do you want to press charges, ma'am?" My father looked stricken. "Don't do this." I looked between them, all the years layering like sediment, the excuses, the favoritism, the rebranded manipulation they called family. "No," I said, "no charges, but I want them off the property today." "Understood," the deputy said. "We can escort them to the station for holding, standard for trespass mediation." My mother gasped. "You're sending us to jail." "Maybe sitting still will make you think," I replied. By the time they were seated in the back of the squad car, Merrick was loading their things into the trunk of our car. We drove straight to a local storage facility and prepaid a unit for 30 days. That was more than they deserved, but I wasn't trying to be cruel, just done. We returned home late that afternoon. The apartment was quiet. I dropped the keys on the desk and sat down. The deed to the Brevard house was right there under a stack of utility bills. I picked it up, ran my fingers across the seal. "I've paid for everything," I murmured. A pause, then peace. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. My body went through the motions, washed my face, changed into pajamas, curled up next to Merrick, but my mind spun like a wheel with no brakes. Even as I shut my eyes, I saw my parents' faces as the officers asked them to leave my property. I remembered the click of their car trunk, the shuffle of their bags, the silence they left behind like a smoke trail. But I was about to learn, when you set boundaries, some people see it as war. 3 days later, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. The morning sun barely pierced the curtains, but the light from the screen stabbed harder than any glare. 17 missed calls, 14 voicemails, more texts than I cared to count, all from cousins' aunts, even a neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years. And then I saw it, a Facebook post from Vera. Her profile photo, a cropped wedding shot with Callista. The caption read, "In our golden years, we've been cast out by our own daughter, treated like criminals. All we ever did was love her." Below that, 2 photos. One of my parents, sitting hunched over on my porch steps, suitcases by their feet like they were stranded refugees. Another zoomed in of the officer's cruiser in the background. She had taken those before they were escorted away. The comments came in waves. She kicked them out. "How heartless. Kids today have no soul. My son would never." One relative wrote, "This is what happens when you marry a man who wants to isolate you. She's not herself anymore." I didn't cry. I didn't text back. I just sat there, phone in hand, letting the words hit like tiny darts. Then came the private messages. "Aunt Priscilla, your mom is devastated. She says you won't even let them stay in the little cottage. Isn't that the one you never use? A childhood friend? I don't know what's going on with you, but I miss the old Kaylin, the one who always put family first. Someone else. You think a house matters more than your own parents. Shame." My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to type 1,000 truths. I could have said I paid for that house. I was never asked, only assumed. I could have attached the mortgage statement, the title, the receipts from every sleepless weekend I worked extra just to afford that cabin. But I didn't. Instead, I turned the phone face down and stood. My knees were shaky, not from sadness, but the pressure of holding in every word I wanted to scream. Merrick was already in the kitchen scrambling eggs. He looked up when I entered, reading my face instantly. "You saw it?" he said. I nodded. He wiped his hands on a towel and walked over. "You don't owe anyone an explanation, not unless you want to." I sat at the counter. It's not just the post. It's that so many people believe it without even asking. He reached into the drawer beside the fridge, pulled out a thin manila folder, and placed it in front of me. Inside, printouts of email screenshots, payment confirmations, tax records, everything. "I've been saving these for years," he said, "in case you ever needed to remember what's real." I looked down at my own signature on dozens of documents. I had made all the payments. I had paid all the taxes. It was my name that bought peace, even when they treated it like wallpaper meant to fade into the background. Later that afternoon, I headed to the office. I needed to move to breathe something that didn't smell like betrayal. But walking past the glass conference room, I saw Emily, the new intern, being scolded by one of the senior partners. She stood stiff arms behind her back, taking every word without blinking. My chest tightened. That had been me, once silent, accommodating, careful, never to rock the boat. I had worked holidays, missed funerals, swallowed slights so sharp they left splinters in my pride. Because back then, I thought silence was strength. But as I watched Emily nod and apologize for something that wasn't even her fault, I saw it differently. Silence wasn't strength, it was survival, and it kept you small. That night back at home, I made a cup of tea and sat at the dining table. Merrick was grading student essays in the living room, occasionally looking up at me, his eyes patient and steady. I opened my laptop. I didn't go to Facebook right away. I started in Word typed, deleted, typed again, then started over. By midnight, I had 3 paragraphs, then 6, then a dozen. I recounted the facts not with venom, but with precision, the years I paid the mortgage, the money I poured into the cabin, the times I was told to just understand when Callista got more louder and first. I didn't name-call. I didn't retaliate. I ended the draft with one sentence. "If you want the whole truth, I'll tell it, but you better be ready for it." I stared at the cursor, blinking after that line. It wasn't shaking, neither was I. I didn't close the laptop right away. I sat there in the dim glow of the screen, watching my own words stare back at me. They weren't laced with bitterness or coated in sugar, just the truth, calm, unfiltered, and long overdue. By morning, the storm had rolled in. Not the wild kind with thunder and lightning, but the quiet type that knocks once, twice, then kicks the door down. My inbox was full. Cousins, old friends, even people I hadn't spoken to in years, all weighing in. "I didn't know you paid for the house," one cousin messaged. "That changes everything." Some of the nastier comments under Mom's viral post had vanished, like people were quietly trying to backpedal now that receipts were involved. No apology from Callista, of course. No explanation from Mom. Silence speaks too. And in my family it always said, "You don't matter enough to deserve an answer." I was halfway through a cup of coffee when the email came. It was from a name I barely remembered. Gregory Bell. He used to be the family's estate lawyer. I clicked it open, half expecting a form letter, but it was personal. "Ms. Rosund, I came across your Facebook post, and I believe there's something you should be aware of." My stomach tightened. In 2016, the email continued, "Your parents initiated a draft to transfer ownership of the family home into your name. It was never finalized." In 2018, however, the deed was reassigned to another beneficiary, your sister. No legal notice was required, as the property was still under joint parental ownership at the time. I reread that paragraph at least 5 times. They had planned to give it to me. At one point, they meant to, but then they changed their minds quietly, without a word. I stared at the wall for a while, letting that sink in. Then, I opened a new browser tab and logged into the county records portal. Just a hunch. But when I searched the Brevard address, my vacation home there, it was a title search inquiry from my mother's name, dated 2 weeks ago. They were checking the legal status, preparing maybe to try again. The betrayal didn't feel like a stab anymore. It felt like a spreadsheet, a calculated column decision. Long game manipulation built on the assumption that I'd never question it. I stood up, crossed the apartment to the hallway closet, and pulled down a black accordion file. The label was smudged but still visible. Mortgage 2017-2024. Inside were years of documentation, loan statements, receipts, proof of every transfer, every dime I'd moved from my personal account to keep the roof over our heads, every dollar I thought I was investing into family. I laid them all out on the dining table sheet by sheet. By late afternoon, I had scanned and organized everything into digital folders labeled timestamped undeniable. Then I sat back at my laptop and drafted a second post. No emotion this time, just facts, screenshots, PDF attachments, the math. I laid it all out. The mortgage terms, the automatic payments, the home repair expenses. At the bottom, I typed one line, for years I paid in silence. Now I present the math. I hovered over post finger, still breath even. Just as I was about to click, my phone buzzed. Merrick, you might want to see what Calista just posted. I opened the app and saw my sister, hair curled, makeup flawless, standing in front of the porch at my vacation house. My porch captioned in pastel script, "Home is where the heart is." My fingers curled into a fist before I even realized it. I didn't scroll. I stared. There she was, Calista, glowing in soft morning light, holding a mug I recognized. My mug, the one I'd bought from that little shop in Brevard, hand-thrown pottery with a blue glaze that reminded me of the lake. Her caption read, "Peaceful weekend at the lake house. Grateful for family." I kept looking. Another photo. Calista and Vera side by side, laughing on the porch swing I had installed myself during that brutal summer, staining wood under the sun until my palms blistered. The background gave them away. The birdhouse Merrick had mounted on the cedar tree. The wild mint we planted near the stairs. The welcome mat I never replaced after Mom called it too plain. It was still there, like I'd never left. I didn't comment, didn't text, didn't throw anything. I whispered to no one but myself, steady and low. So it's war then. By 9 a.m. the next morning, I was sitting across from Gregory Bell, the estate lawyer, again. His office smelled like paper and carpet cleaner. He offered coffee. I declined. I slid a manila envelope across the desk, thick with receipts, scanned documents, and mortgage summaries. He leafed through them, nodding as he scanned key points. "This is thorough," he said. "We could file for injunctive relief if they attempt any claim or entry again." "So I want more than that," I said, his brow arched slightly. "I want a cease and desist letter." I added, my voice flat, legally binding specific language directly to Vera and Calista. No room for misunderstanding. He didn't blink. Done. That evening, Merrick came home, carrying 2 grocery bags, and a look I'd learned to read. Quiet but urgent. "There's something you need to hear," he said, as he set the bags down. He pulled out his phone, tapped around, and handed it to me. The recording was dated 6 months ago. I remembered that weekend. He'd stepped out to call her after a strange voicemail about family plans. Her voice filled the room. "Kaylin's always been the workhorse. That's her role. Calista deserves comfort. She's had a harder time emotionally. You know that." I didn't flinch. Merrick sat beside me, unsure whether to say anything. I handed the phone back. "We'll use that." The next morning, I sat down with my laptop. No emotion this time, just precision. I uploaded the second post. First screenshots of bank transfers labeled by year, then PDFs of the mortgage agreement, then the title logs showing the inquiry into my vacation property. I ended with the audio. Beneath it, I wrote, "This isn't revenge. This is clarity. I won't be rewritten." I hit post. Within hours, the reactions rolled in. Messages shared support from people I barely knew. "You don't owe them anything," one woman commented. "Thank you for showing your receipts," another wrote. "So many of us stay quiet. We shouldn't have to." Some tried to defend Vera and Calista until they heard the clip. I didn't reply to anyone. I just let it sit. Truth has its own volume. By evening, Calista finally broke her silence. She posted a screenshot of my post with a caption, "We never wanted this to go public, but if you want public, fine. Let's talk legal." Vera commented right below it, "She'll regret this." I closed my phone, then smiled, because by then I already had the final piece I needed, and they had no idea. The morning sun cut across the floor of my apartment like a blade. I sat at the dining table, sipping lukewarm coffee, waiting. It didn't take long. At exactly 9:07 a.m., Gregory Bell forwarded me the scanned letter we'd finalized together 2 days ago. Subject line delivered. The cease and desist had gone out by courier and email. It addressed Callista formally, Ms. Callista Rosand Wells, and outlined clear legal terms: immediate removal of all social media content referencing the Brevard property, full return of all copies of the house key, and an explicit warning regarding the fraudulent title inquiry logged in my name. The closing paragraph read, "Should any further attempts at misrepresentation or possession be made, the undersigned reserves the right to pursue damages and full injunctive relief under state and federal law." Enclosed with the letter were scanned PDFs, proof of the title search attempt, and evidence Vera and Callista had accessed my mortgage files using old personal information. They had tried to start a transfer quietly, illegally under my nose. I leaned back and whispered to the ceiling, "You should have known better." By noon, the family group chat detonated. It started with a message from Aunt Darlene, "Is this true?" She attached a screenshot of my post, followed by a screenshot of the letter which someone had leaked. I didn't ask who. Uncle Robert chimed in next. Kaylin did what she had to proud of her, for standing up for herself. That was when Callista left the chat. Vera responded in the form of a voice memo. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "I did it for the family, for the image, for you girls to be close. If we look like we're struggling, people talk. If Callista looks like she's lacking, she spirals. I thought we were doing what's best for everyone." I didn't reply. Let them sit in the silence they'd always handed to me. The call from Callista came at 5:41 p.m. I stared at the name glowing on my phone. I picked up. "You really want to drag our family name through court," she said immediately. "It's already there," I answered. "I'm just finally in the room." She paused long enough for me to hear the tension in her breath. "You're choosing property over people, Kaylin." "No," I said slowly, calmly. "I'm choosing peace over manipulation." Another pause. Then the line went dead. I didn't call back. The next day at work, we had a team lunch for our new intern project. We sat in the lounge conference room. Cheap chairs, paper plates, someone's homemade brownies sweating through foil. It was nothing fancy, but when the intern handed me a napkin with a little name tag taped to it, I froze. Kaylin, it read, spelled right. The handwriting was neat, not hurried, not second-guessed. I stared at it a little longer than I should have. For the first time, my name wasn't misspelled, not forgotten, not skipped, just seen. I folded the napkin and slipped it into my purse without saying a word. That evening, Gregory emailed again. He had a short update. Vera and Ronald have relocated to a retirement community apartment in Hendersonville. 1-bedroom, month-to-month lease. No note from them, no challenge, just quiet compliance. As for Callista, silent, her social feeds wiped clean. No weekend getaways, no mugs, no lakeside photo shoots. I didn't need an audience to feel victorious. Silence in this case was the reward. The final voicemail came that night. I just sat down on the couch when I saw it on my screen. One missed call, one message. It was from Vera. "Kaylin, we need to talk. We know we messed up. Please just talk to us." I didn't save it. I didn't replay it. I deleted it. And that, I realized, was the first real boundary I had ever held with them. The voicemail was gone. Deleted not because I wanted to forget, but because I no longer needed to remember it on their terms. In the weeks that followed, life didn't erupt into something dramatic or cinematic. It quieted, and for once that felt like a reward. I went back to work. I made dinner with Merrick, most nights chicken stir-fry one evening, lentil soup the next. We watched documentaries about national parks and argued about whether we'd ever go camping. Him, yes, me, hard pass. We laughed more than we used to, not because things were suddenly perfect, but because the air was finally clear. On a crisp Saturday morning, I drove out to Brevard. The vacation home, the one I'd fought for, the one I almost lost, was now rented by a traveling writer named June. She greeted me on the porch with a smile that didn't need explanation. Inside, the space had shifted. A few of her things dotted the room: books on the coffee table, a vintage typewriter by the window, but it still smelled faintly of lemon oil and cedar the way I liked it. As I walked her through the drawer setup in the kitchen, she paused. "These napkins," she said, unfolding one gently. "They're linen right-hand made." "Yeah," I nodded. "They were a gift. I left them behind once. Now they stay." She smiled and ran her fingers over the stitching. "It feels like someone really lived here." I nodded again, softer this time. They did. The next week, an email from Callista landed in my inbox. Subject: clearing the air. It was a few stiff paragraphs dressed in civility. No names of wrongdoing, just a vague admission of regret over how things unfolded. A line about wanting to preserve peace. Not once did she say sorry. I didn't reply. The day after that, a bouquet of lilies arrived at my office. No card. I turned to our receptionist and gestured toward the flowers. "They're not for me," I said without blinking. "You can keep them." She blinked. "Are you sure they're beautiful?" "They're not mine to keep. They're someone else's performance." She took them, and I returned to my desk. On a rainy Thursday, I had lunch with one of my longest clients, Lorraine, a retired professor with a sharp tongue and sharper eyes. She'd been widowed for 10 years, but still wore her gold band like it was armor. Over coffee, she said it out of nowhere. "You always did your job quietly, Kaylin, but I've watched you. You never let them erase you." It landed heavier than I expected, not because it was a compliment, but because it came from someone who didn't flatter easily. I smiled, swallowing a lump I hadn't realized was rising. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." A few days later, I passed by a storefront in Asheville, glass windows streaked with early spring drizzle, and caught my reflection. Not a villain, not a victim, just me. Hair, a little windswept, eyes less tired than they used to be. A woman who no longer lived to be chosen. A woman who chose herself. In my head, I could hear it clearly. They called me ungrateful. But what they really meant was, "You stopped giving us everything we asked for." That wasn't betrayal. That was boundaries. At the office, I began mentoring a new junior hire, Anna, fresh out of grad school. Quiet, capable, a little too quick to apologize. One afternoon, I walked past her desk and saw her face fall as a partner took credit for her work. I stopped, turned back. "Hey," I said firmly but gently. "I saw the report. You did good work. Next time you bring it to the meeting yourself." Her eyes widened, unsure how to respond, but I smiled. "Trust me, speak up early. It saves years." That night, back at my apartment, I opened the bottom drawer of the hall table. Inside was a small wooden box I'd picked up at a flea market years ago, engraved with swirls and a brass latch that stuck sometimes. I opened it and placed the old house key inside the same key they once held up like a trophy, the same one they tried to use to walk through my walls. I labeled the box with a strip of masking tape, things I survived, and for the first time in my life, I didn't give away the key.